hour number 2 of the Mike Miller Show. TruthBeToldMedia.com, new home of Daily Paul Radio. Listen, as we teased at the beginning of the hour, I am joined by Dan Bongino. For those of you not as familiar with Dan as you should be, let me tell you a little bit about him before we get started. Dan's decorated Secret Service agent, served under 3 presidential administrations, best-selling author. His book, Life Inside the Bubble, Why a Top-Ranked Secret Service Agent Walked Away from It All, and current Republican congressional candidate in Maryland's 6th District. But Dan, before I let you talk, brother, I want to just read just a snippet. In 2016, Dan entered into duty with the elite Presidential Protective Division in the administration of President George W. Bush. Dan distinguished himself by becoming one of the earliest tenured agents to be given responsibility for an operational section of the protective detail. Dan remained on protective duty during the change in administration to President Barack Obama, quickly becoming highest-ranking member of the operational shift of agents. Dan, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Listen. Obviously, it's today in particular, and I'm thrilled to have you on the show, and today in particular, the 13th anniversary of 9/11. I talked about that in the first hour. I played the iconic clip, historic clip of George Bush climbing up on that stack of rubble with a bullhorn. Before I ask you some specific questions, what are your thoughts today, 13 years later?
Yeah, it was a depressing day. I mean, tragic, sad, frightening. I remember being up there, and ironically, I just met my wife. We were just dating at the time, a couple weeks earlier, and she happened to work in 120 Broadway, which is right looking into the pit, which is right there. And our building, the Secret Service building, was 7 World Trade, which I had just transferred out of earlier to go to our Long Island office, about 30 miles out of the city. And, the day for me, like I'm sure for everyone else and all your listeners, I can remember just in minute detail. And I just remember thinking, accurately so, as everyone else probably assumed that day, that the world was never going to be the same, no matter what. And looking back today, it's a shame. The shame of it is that some of the gains we've made, and I'm by no means an interventionist. I largely lean towards the libertarian wing of the party. But a number of the gains we've made and the security measures we've implemented have managed to be politicized by people who have the national security of the nation as their silver medal, not their gold medal. And that's the shame of it.
Absolutely. And, of course, that leads us naturally to Obama's address to the nation last night, 13 years hence, what I have called a hastily crafted and I think politically necessary speech about, his new strategy as it relates to ISIS. How do you think he did last night?
It was terrible. I mean, I just find it amazing that he spent the last nearly 6 years with this ridiculous blame Bush strategy for everything. Listen, I blame Bush for enough. TARP, the grotesque levels of spending. I frankly was not a supporter of the Iraq War when it started. But that doesn't. He's the president of the United States. That doesn't absolve him from taking a leadership role as the chief executive and commander in chief of the country and stop looking for blame. I mean, what coach blames the last coach's winning or losing season for all his problems? I say that because if you listen to the speech and you break it down in just a little bit of detail, you'll notice that he basically restated the Bush doctrine. The Bush doctrine, harbor our enemies and we're coming after you next, and kind of a preemptive strike. The only glaring difference being he said, no, we're not going to use ground troops, which is not true either. There are 1,000 troops he just sent over there. I assure you, they're not flying around in jetpacks with their boots not touching the ground. So the president, with this man, sadly, everything is naked, brutal politics. And I'm not naive, having run for office and having worked in the White House for a significant period of time and seen the goings-on in the 18 acres there. There's politics and everything. But the difference with this administration is not that there's politics and everything. It's that everything is politics with them. There's very little driven by leadership or what's better for the country. His sole purpose for existence at this point is seemingly to eradicate conservatives, libertarians, and Republicans, and whatever carnage is left in his wake is all collateral damage.
You know, and I've argued this for a long time. I mean, I don't think, like you said, everything's politics. I don't think he has the capacity, the desire, the understanding, whatever you want to call it, to govern, to know the difference between campaigning, running for president, and actually rolling up his sleeves and governing, you know, driven by ideology, driven by faith from my father, driven by, you know, the notion that America is inherently, you know, it's due its comeuppance, you know, because it only got where it got by exploiting and bullying the rest of the world. You know, wealthy people in America only got where they got on the backs of the poor and the middle class. I mean, this is what this guy really thinks, isn't it? He is all about, to your point, politics and leftist ideology, isn't he?
Yeah, the shame of it, no pun intended, is that, you know, Dinesh calls it, Dinesh D'Souza in his movie calls it the shame narrative, and in his book. And that's what they live by. That's the new left. Keep in mind, this is not any longer the party of JFK, you know, the party of JFK, which said, you know, marginal tax rates paradoxically don't move with tax revenue, meaning as you raise taxes, you don't necessarily raise more revenue, or ask not what your country can do for you. I mean, that party's dead, and the real shame of it is these new American shamers, if we'll call them, the Hillary Clintons, not necessarily the Bills, but the Hillary Clintons, the Barack Obamas, the John Kerrys, who are so seemingly embarrassed to live here, are more than happy to suckle off the teat of American capitalism, as John Kerry so aptly, you know, what is he, kite sailing? I don't even know what that is. I don't have enough money to do what he does. You know, and Barack Obama, who's going to be collecting millions of dollars, you know, in speeches, and White sat on the board, you know, and was paid ridiculous amounts of money to sit on boards and make probably nonsensical decisions. I mean, these people are more than happy to live the American lifestyle, the American ethos of each, you know, to each his own, and hard work matters. And then when there's a political gain to bash the other side, they manipulate this shame narrative. And what really frightens me is they've gotten the old JFK Democrats to buy into this crap. You know, it took my mother, who is a JFK Dem, a long time to realize that this was all garbage, that he's making it up as he goes along. He's just trying to crush the opposition.
And of course, he's done that by and large with the liberal media flying wingman for him, right? Running static. Listen, you've written quite a bit and talked quite a bit about the ideological bias in the media, as have I. You're just higher profile than I am. But anyway,
I don't know about that, but I appreciate it.
Well, what are your observations there? And maybe more importantly, what the heck can we do about that?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I get this question a lot. You know, you're running a campaign. Why do you spend so much energy, which I do, just in this two-front war? You know, one against your opponent, Democrats, and the other against the media. Because, folks, I'll be honest with you. If I had to triage my battles, the media is a bigger problem than the Democrats.
Exactly.
You know, if the media told the American people what the modern Democratic Party was really about, we wouldn't have any problems. I know this. I've been knocking on doors for 3 years. I get to talk to actual people in real life. And I'll ask them, you know, I'm just curious, like if they get angry, if I go to a Democrat door, I say to them, just, if you have, you know, a minute or two, I'm not asking you to vote for me anymore. It's clear you're going to support the other guy, and that's okay. But can you tell me why you support him? And some of the stuff that comes out of people's mouths, it's just amazing. Not all of them. There are some Democrats who say, hey, I don't mind higher taxes. Okay, fair enough. I get it. That's what America's about. You want to support that? You're welcome to pay. But then you have other people who say, well, the economy is doing great under Barack Obama. Really? I mean, do you realize when unemployment was 5% under President Bush, the media was talking like we were in the Great Depression Part 2? I mean, this is incredible. And unemployment now, because people are dropping out of the workforce in mass. Record numbers of Americans on food stamps who aren't working. And the media treats this like, hey, recovery, man, it's right around the corner. You know, Barack is leading from the front. And people buy it. That's why I spend so much energy just savaging the mainstream media that's so biased against our campaign at every opportunity, and it works. And I'll tell you, there's a strategy, and here it is if you got a second.
Oh, yeah.
You have to name names. You have got to name names. So to your listening audience, if you're a candidate, if you're an activist, if you're a supporter, if you're someone like yourself who has a platform, radio show, website that people follow, you have got to name names. I'm not just talking about the Herald Mail media by us and the Baltimore Sun. I'm talking about the people that write the nasty articles. If they're legitimate, they're legitimate. You leave it alone. But if they go after you and it's completely biased and written to help the other guy, you have to start naming names and calling them out. It drives them crazy. And go to their advertisers, too. And that's what we did, and it has made a significant impact.
You know, I'm going to jump ahead here and then come back if we have time. But in reference to what you just said, there was a story up on Red State a couple of days ago. Dan Bongino's campaign ignored by the media. Did you see that?
Yeah, we saw it, and it pretty much lays the case out in almost federal agent investigative methodology as to how this local media outlet, the Herald Mail, has just pretended for a year and a half that we just don't exist. It's been amazing. And sure enough, they called us last night asking us if we'd make a statement about the president's speech. I'm telling you, this stuff works. You have to shame these people because they know what they're doing is wrong, and they just get away with it because people are afraid to call them out because they're afraid, oh, we're going to get nasty coverage in the future. Listen, folks, if you're a conservative or libertarian, you're going to get nasty coverage everywhere. Anyway, that doesn't make a difference. You're not going to change these people. The only thing you can do is fight back and force them to do the right thing.
My guest is Dan Bongino. Dan, obviously you are the current Republican congressional candidate for Maryland's 6th District. Let me ask you just a dopey, open-ended radio interviewer's question. Why should people support you and your candidacy?
I like to keep it simple. I always remember the Teddy Kennedy question. Remember they asked him why he was going to run for president? You look baffled.
Yeah, the headlight look in his face.
Right. I mean, if you don't understand why you're going to run, then why would other people care? Number one, I've been there. I've seen the inside of D.C., not as a politician and not as a lobbyist and a staffer, but I got the bird's eye view as a Secret Service agent. And although I will never engage in tell-all tactics, I don't share private conversations or anything, I can assure you it's a lot worse than you all think it is. You've been sold out, and been sold out badly. And for a price not even commensurate with your value. And you can talk. I mean, you can sit on the couch and eat your Ruffles or whatever you want to do and just take it and collect your paycheck, or you can leave and do something about it. And I was not going to get buried 6 feet deep knowing that I was part of the problem. So I ran. And the message for us is simple. I just think you could spend your money better than the government. You should control your own health care, and you should pick where your kid goes to school. It's no more complicated than that.
I've talked a lot about, and others have too, and probably you as well. I mean, this notion of this permanent underclass in America that Barack Obama and the progressives, and I always love that term progressive as it relates to what these people are trying to do to this country, but they want to build that number as highly as they can, right? I mean, ideally it would be plus 50% and all those people would vote, and then Republicans would never win another national or statewide election again. But do you fear... and I got to be honest, I'm obviously not familiar with your district, but that there are so many of those people that buy into this stuff, right? That they want to do the nanny state. They want to be subsidized by taxpayers. Is the number of those people growing to the extent that it's becoming harder and harder for limited government people to win elections?
Well, I'll tell you this. The answer is no. People don't prefer the nanny state. And I know sometimes I say that and people are aghast. Oh, how could you say that? Of course you'd rather sit home. Well, you'd rather sit home if you don't understand there's another option. Would you sit home and collect $500 a week if someone was sitting outside your door with $1,000? No, you'd get off your butt and go collect $1,000. Famous, we spent a lot of time in graduate school with neuropsychology and learning about learning theory. Seligman once did an experiment with animals where he would shock them and then chain them down so they couldn't move. It was quite bizarre. And after a while, they stopped trying to get away. And the theory after a while was called learned helplessness, that they just learned not to move because they couldn't get away and they would just take the shock. Until an enterprising researcher came along later and figured out that if you showed whatever the animal may be, an opportunity to get out,
if you presented to him some kind of a light or whatever it may be, he would take it no matter what. My point is that the Republican Party has to run on a growth message. Listen, I get it that we need to cut budgets at the federal level. I was there, believe me. We are in a grotesque amount of debt. I understand that. And the only way to change that, though, is to get elected and, in fact, change it. You're not going to get elected on the message of, listen, everything's gloom and doom. It's all over. Forget it. Cut this, cut that. Listen, we have to, the amount of federal budget cuts relative to GDP that have to be done are substantial. But we can grow out of this for a while and at least delay our eventual bankruptcy to the point where we can start to cut back. We have to grow the party on a growth message. And when I say growth message, I mean a specific one. Folks, here's why this works. Here's why when we cut your taxes, the economy then grows, and tax revenue to pay off this massive amount of debt that Republicans and Democrats have incurred relative to our GDP will go down over time. Here's how it works. Here's how it's recycled back into the economy. And here's, frankly, why raising your taxes will do nothing but lead to economic destruction in the future. And I don't think we've done that. Everything with us has been the emphasis on the cut portion, which is necessary. But I almost analogize it to selling a Corvette. If you're selling a Corvette to this guy in a leather jacket and gold chain, I had a Corvette once. It has really good windshield wipers, but nobody cares. They care about the engine. You tell them about the engine, the growth part. It doesn't mean the windshield wipers change. Yes, we're going to have to cut budget, but there's an emphasis portion. I think some Republicans get lost in that, and they're always talking about this gloom and doom. Gloom and doom, the best years we've had in the last 3 decades have been under Republican policy, not necessarily Republican. Even Clinton cut back the budget, and we got to give him a little bit of credit for that. But the Reagan years, these were the best years we've had in America.
Listen, let me ask you this, because I've talked to Ted Cruz about this. I've talked to Marco Rubio about this. And the word you used several times is message. We need a better message. We need a growth message. I get that, and I understand that, and I agree with it. But messages happen on, both sides, all sides of the spectrum. And poll after poll, people are over government, right? People are over Congress more than they're, believe it or not. I mean, stranger things have happened, I guess, than they're over Obama. Do we need to do concrete things? I mean, do we need conservative investors to go build stuff, if you will, open businesses in depressed communities? Do we need to listen? I'm not from Missouri. I'm a Hoosier, but do we need the show me thing? People, I think, are by and large, they want where's the beef thing after the message, right?
Right. You're absolutely right. They want policy. They want, Jack Kemp was famous for enterprise zones and public-private partnerships. Listen, we're lying to people, though, if we get into that. And I'm not going to do that. Reagan once said, you don't follow the polls, you move people to the polls. Everybody quotes Reagan, but some of the stuff he said was quite genius. I mean, he had his faults. We tend to glorify him. I mean, he spent a lot of money, too. I mean, whether Tip O'Neill sent it to him or not, he signed off on it. But you have to move people to the polls. And I say that because when we go into Baltimore City, an area that's really struggling, when I was running the Senate campaign, people would say things like, oh, why, so I talk about school choice, but why does that matter? The place is dying here. We have, crack dealers on the corner destroying our neighborhood. And I would explain to them, the folks, the bedrock of the future, we're not an agricultural, manufacturing-centric society, and we still do that. But the society now is an idea society. Things like the iPhone, they're valuable, and they're worth billions of dollars, potentially trillions over the next 100 years, these ideas. The ideas are only going to be put in people's heads and these children's heads in Baltimore City if we can educate them, if we can get into their heads that there's a different way to engineer better products. I mean, look at the future for us. Pharmaceuticals, entertainment, technology. That's where the future value is in the United States. We're not, and we never are going to be, again, the capital of rubber dog toys, okay? You want to build rubber dog toys, they produce a whole bunch of them in Vietnam, in certain areas of Asia. That business is not coming back, and we don't need that. We need to produce the best scientists, technologists, engineers, mathematicians in the future. And when we do that, growth comes with it. And you have to move people passionately with your speeches, and you have to learn how to message that so people move towards us and they see us as the party of education opportunity and economic opportunity, not the other way around.
I could not agree with you more. And listen, in our remaining few minutes, I want to ask you a couple of other stuff, and I want to talk about your book quickly. But before we go there, you guys, www.bongino.com, go there. Read his positions on the issues. You're hearing him right now. He makes sense. We need more Dan Bonginos in Congress, you guys. And as I just said, I'm a Hoosier, right? I don't live in Maryland, whatever you guys call yourself, Marylanders or whatever have you. So go there, support Dan, learn about what he believes. Let me. I want to talk about your book for a second, but just quickly. Can we just talk amnesty for a second? So, Obama, well, he calls it path to citizenship. So, but how more blatant could this guy be than to disingenuously now push the decree, right, the royal edict, into some period beyond the November midterms? I mean, how more blatant could that be, regardless of why he says he's doing it?
Well, listen, you get this, I get this, but we're really talking to people in your listening audience who are just getting hip to this guy's act. He doesn't care. That's the point. You and I both know that. When he said fundamental transformation, what did you think? He was kidding? Did you think it was a joke? Did you think he just randomly picked only 2 words, like, fundamental transformation? No, that speech was written for him. He approved that. He meant what he said. He doesn't care. He's willing to risk all of his political capital on illegally bringing people into the country who are not interested in following our laws, learning our language, anything like that. Things you have to do to be successful here. Follow laws and learn the language, not hard, right? My wife's an immigrant. I get it. The process is emotional out of me. But he's not interested in that. He's interested in one thing. And it's a nice, actually, topic to bring up because it goes back to how we started. He's interested in raw political power and votes. That's
Bingo.
It. Nothing else matters.
Bingo. Listen, we're coming to the bottom of the hour, and I know you got to go. Tell me about your book real quick. And I got to tell you, I've been fascinated with the Secret Service since I was a little kid, and I'm being honest here. Life Inside the Bubble, why a top-ranked Secret Service agent walked away from it all. Why did you walk away from it all?
Well, listen, folks, we're in a perilous time, and I say to all your listeners out there, too, and it's great you're listening to the show. I appreciate it. I'm sure you appreciate it more than anyone. But you got to get involved. Action changes the world. Thoughts, speeches, they're all wonderful. But if it doesn't motivate you to do something and do something special right now to change our tomorrows and to hopefully alter some of the bad policies of our yesterdays, then nothing's going to change. And I couldn't sit back anymore and watch what was going on. Remember, I pledged allegiance to the Constitution. Not a person. There's a big difference.
And, more of us need to be there. And it's just, listen, you guys, you got to go to Amazon.com and you got to read this book. I've read the book, Life Inside the Bubble, Why a Top-Ranked Secret Service Agent Walked Away from It All. And so the campaign, again, we got a minute or so. How are we doing?
I'll tell you what, we're gonna be the upset of the cycle. I know every candidate you interview tells you that. Our metrics, I'm a numbers guy. We're raising more money. Our polls are terrific. Our grassroots volunteer base is nothing's been seen like this in Maryland in decades. And we're in a D+4, tough district in the PVI, but a more than winnable district. And I'm reasonably confident this is going to be the upset of the cycle.
I sure hope it is. Do you think we're going to take the Senate back?
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. I'm going to say Stu Rothenberg, I think, has it pegged. I think it's going to be between 8 and 10, probably 9 seats, split the difference. No, I don't see any less than 8, though. They're in a world of trouble. So, the answer to that is, I think we're going to pick up a couple House seats as well. I mean, Nia Loves is already in the bag in Utah, and we've got a couple more that have just broken in that direction. I even think that Tierney seat, even though he lost his primary in Massachusetts, I think we have a good shot at taking, I think TC's running